Hey, John.
Hi, Jeanette. How are
How are
you?
you?
Good.
This is, let's see,
This
mm-mm-mm.
this black
Back
on.
on Maine. Great, perfect. I'm gonna make you the host.
Thank you.
And then there is a waiting room. So I'll stick around for a little bit just to kind of like help you manage the waiting room, but everything should be recording, hopefully. I don't know.
Oh yeah, it shows that it is. Yep.
Uh, Marcia should be here in a little, oh, wait, not Marcia. Oh, I
Rose.
can't, yeah.
Rose. Yeah.
Rose should be here, so I think we should be okay.
All
How are you
right.
doing?
Doing good. Had a lot of technical learning over the past 2 days.
It's been a
So
challenge,
yeah, it's
you
hard.
know.
I had somebody got stuck outside the room, a presenter, and we tried everything, Sarah and I, and then the last thing we tried ended up working. It was
Of
just
course,
using a different link and
of course. Yeah, it feels like we were just reflecting on this um that Sarah, Robert, Emily, and I have just been doing tech support. So in a normal conference, you would experience sessions and you would meet people and people would give you feedback in real time. And it would be rewarding in that way, even though you were working it and like running around with like a chicken with its head cut off. But this session, like this conference for us has been really challenging because like we don't have any of that, right? So all
yeah.
of our interactions, or most of our interactions, are negative, or most of our interactions are urgent, right? And so,
You
um,
guys are firefighting more than anything, right?
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
So uh, I don't know. I
that's
feel like if I were gonna give a session on doing a virtual conference, I would just tell people not to do it. But
I guess maybe we're better off this time. Um,
yeah.
I just admitted somebody.
Hi.
Hello?
I think they're still connecting to the audio.
I think it's Jerry.
Hello, hello.
Hi,
Hi.
Jerry?
Hey, yes, hello.
Hi. John.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yes. Hey, I go by Genius is the name that I use for everything related to Black-owned Maine and our organizations. But yes, great to meet you too as well.
Great.
Hey, Genius. I'm Jeanette. Thanks so
Hello.
much for doing this.
Hey, right on. Yes, great to be here.
Rose is here too.
Oh, good. All right, John, it looks like you're all
Okay.
set. So I'm going
All
to
right.
pop out and see what other fires I need to put out. But it was good seeing all of you.
Thank you,
Life.
Jeanette.
Good luck. Have a great session.
Thank you. Yes, you have quite the setup there. Looks really good.
Hey,
Are
thank
you
you,
in a
thank you.
recording studio?
I am. Yeah, I record music, rappers, singers. I record podcasts. Do some content creation, some media stuff. Yeah, a lot of audio and engineering and creativity type stuff. You know.
Awesome. That's great. I
Yeah.
do a
So we're
little
excited.
photography, but I don't have the voice to to do any kind of singing.
Yeah, well, hey, we all have different skills, because I'm better at making the beats than singing. I'll sing a little bit, but I know where I'm useful,
Yeah.
so that goes a long way. Speaking of today, I was trying to make sure that I had here. John, can you hear that audio? Can you hear that music?
Yeah, but I think we should check something. I can. Okay, so you're gonna play through the mic that you have there, or you want to play it as a recorded content, or you're gonna play it live.
Um, the this audio here is just coming from a piece of gear that I have live, we'll say yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Live is great. If you need to play something that's coming out of the audio in your computer, we might need to take additional steps to make sure that the sound sharing is enabled when it's not coming from, when it's not live. So I don't know if you have plans to share anything like a video or any other audio that
No.
you need to share. No.
Mm.
This is a good question. So for instance, like right now, you can hear my voice pretty clear, right?
Great. Yes.
Can you hear this music at a reasonable volume?
Oh yeah, I can hear that music. Anything that you're playing that's using the mic that you have there, it will play without any need for additional configuration.
Yeah, so what I'm
But
doing right now is all I would need.
oh yeah, that's great. You're all set.
Cool.
Hear that, Rose? Hi, Rose. My name is John.
Hey,
Oh,
nice
I
to
didn't
meet you.
change my name. Sorry.
Oh,
Nice
good.
to meet you as well.
And I'm Sarah. I'll just be floating in the background. John is going to be your person,
Okay.
but I'm just here in case all technology fails, and then I can put some things together on the back end, hopefully. But Zoom has
Okay.
actually been the best working technology in this conference. So I think you're going to be all set.
Sweet.
Cool.
We like
Awesome.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, no problem. And there is a waiting room set up. So we'll just keep folks out of this session until you're ready to go. John, you know how to do the waiting room, right?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
nobody in the waiting room now, but I'm sure they'll start to come in.
They're gonna start to come. Okay, I'm gonna disappear myself, but I'm here. You might have to say my name more than once to get me back. But I'm here in
Okay.
case you need me, okay?
Okay.
All right,
Awesome.
thank
Have
you.
a great session.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Rose, is there anything that you need to set up or test if it's going to be able to work? Anything that you're wondering?
Not really. The only thing, so so our workshop is gonna be a lot of questions, back and forth, dialogue,
Mhm.
conversation kind of style. And we really want to make sure that we have some ground rules that we want to set for the session for people, just to ensure that everyone gets a chance to speak.
Yeah.
And those are, I'll just say some of them right now, is we're gonna ask people when they do answer to just keep their answers like within 2 minutes,
Mhm.
just so everyone again can have a chance. And that we may we want to let people know that if there's some silence, it's okay, as people process and think about what they're saying.
Mhm.
And then if people do wish to speak, I should probably move this on my ground rules to the first one, but if people do wish to speak, that they raise their Zoom hand.
Virtual hands.
Yeah, they raise their virtual Zoom hand. And then we also want to say too that we want to make sure that again that everyone has a chance to speak. So we're hoping that you can kind of help us if we're calling on people, if you're like, hey, this person's had their hand raised for a long time, you should probably hit them up and let them speak now. We just want to make sure it's open, to everyone. We're not leaving anybody out, which it
Yeah,
depends, I guess, how many people are in the room, right? But
yeah, I am. I'm your eyes in the chat room and making sure that I can try to bring up something to either one of you. Probably whoever is not talking at the moment, I might send you something just so you get. I bring it to your attention, something that you
Sure.
may not have noticed. So that's totally fine. And also, if there's anything you need me to put in the chat, I can do that while you're talking. If there's something that you want me to, a question that you want me to just put in the chat, I can do that while you're, doing your thing there.
sure, okay. I think that might actually. Okay, here's what I'll do. So we're gonna have 3 different topics,
Mhm.
and each one of those topics will have an initial question as well as some follow-up questions. So as we go about it, as we're talking about it, I will just Well, I'm wondering how the best way to do that.
So for each
Well,
topic,
I can tell you the names of the topics real quick if you want to
Mhm, yeah.
write them down. So we have interorganizational dynamics.
Mhm.
Then we have relationship cultivation.
Yeah.
And barriers to entry.
In that order.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so I can put if as you're talking about them, I can put in any critical information. I think sometimes I've noticed in the other sessions that they're also looking for social media and other information that you're referencing. So it would be
Okay.
really good to get that, so I can share that as
Sure.
you know that as
Yeah.
you talk about them.
Okay. Yeah. I would I can tell you those right now. Our
Oh,
website
I could
is
look that up while you're
Oh, okay. Yeah. Everything is just at Black Owned Maine. It's super easy.
okay. All right, great.
Yeah, no dashes, no numbers, nothing. Luckily we were secure the username.
Great.
Outside them.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
we've got about 2 minutes. Hopefully, I'll start, letting people in the chat room in about 2 minutes. So 1 minute now. So hopefully we're good. We have about 26 people registered, I think, the last time I checked. So I don't know what the number will look like. Could be more people.
Okay.
Okay. When you're ready, I'll just admit
Cool.
all, and then you can go ahead and. I think I'll turn my video off once you guys start presenting.
Okay.
And I think you probably want to request people to, I don't know if they turn their video on and off, but you can say something about that if you want.
Sure.
All right, I'm gonna wait for it to hit 9, then I'll admit all. See.
Genius, do you have the notes up?
Do I have the notes up?
Yeah. I don't see you in the I don't see your little guy in here, so I'm just making sure.
I'm about to admit everybody, you guys.
All right, sounds good. Hey everybody, good morning. We are just figuring out one last piece and we'll be starting in the next minute or so. Thanks for your patience.
Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to everybody. We appreciate y'all coming in and spending some time with us today. One of the things that we're reminding ourselves of this morning is to be intentional while we share this space with each other. And part of that is that we're gonna set a pace where we can breathe a little bit. I don't know about y'all. We get in a lot of Zooms and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of all this. So part of what we're gonna do, part of what we're gonna do here is to set a pace where we can breathe. And I'm gonna start. My name is Genius Black. I'm gonna start by just acknowledging the land that we are on here today. Something that's very important to us at Black Owned Maine, and that in these moments, I want to be important to all of us together collectively, is to understand that the land that we are on, particularly those of us that are in Maine, realistically is land that should be under the stewardship of Wabanaki people, and actually there's a lot of people that we could say, but realistically we just want to sit here for a moment. And if y'all could, I'm going to ask for a moment of silence here shortly. Just gather with me. What I'm going to do here, I'm just actually going to grab here an offering of tobacco, which for me does represent the land that we are on. Is something that comes from the land that we are on. The reason that I do this, one of the reasons that I do this, is I really, as I just create this space for us to share, and I ask for my ancestors to come here and to help guide us and to make this the space where we can all connect. I hold up this offering in remembrance of my Native brothers and sisters and ancestors, because of the land that they are the proper stewards of and how this represents the land. And also because as a Black person, tobacco in this land has played a very impactful role in the lives of my ancestors. So as I open up this space for us, I just represent the land and I respect it. And I'll let y'all know that after this time that we have together, I will return this to the land. But what I'm gonna do right now, I'm just gonna ask for y'all. Rose, if you could help me maybe keep track of roughly a minute. Time can stretch. We're just gonna sit here, we're gonna reflect on this land respectfully as we just allow this space to become what we need it to be, starting now.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you just taking the time just to reflect and sit with ourselves. You know, as interesting as that may feel sometimes. So we are here today representing Black Owned Maine. So I'm going to give a quick introduction into who we are, explain what we hope to achieve from the session today, as well as set some ground rules for how we want to go about the space today. So we are a 11-month-old organization, so still in our infancy, you know, at this point, but have been able to do a lot in the last 11 months, almost a year. It's kind of crazy. We focus on economic empowerment for Black and Brown people in Maine, and we do that through our three pillars. So we focus on what we dub anti-racist economics. We also focus on grassroots education, and the third is what we call the hearth mentality. So essentially, all of those come together through sessions like these, comes together as through, you know, cultivating relationships, working with artists, just so that Black owned Maine can be a welcoming space and a home for people to come who often feel like they're the only one in the room, you know, or they're the only one in the town they live in, especially, you know, as we go further north or further west in Maine. So we really are here to provide a safe or a space for everyone, you know. So we just have a few ground rules that we want to set for this conversation. How this is going to flow, essentially we have 3 different areas that we want to talk about. And we are going to pose questions within those areas, and we're going to ask for you all to sit for a moment and reflect on your answer or how you feel after we ask the question. But we want to hear your answers. We want to know what's going on in your mind, what this brings up. So this is going to be a very interactive session. I will say, there's no obligation to speak. Don't feel pressured, you know, don't feel like a moment of silence means that, oh my gosh, I'm on the blog, I have to say something. Let the moment of silence be what it is. If you are someone who likes to take notes, it might be helpful to grab a pen or a paper or open, you know, a Google Doc or a Microsoft Doc if you're interested. We ask that anyone who does wish to speak raises their Zoom hand, which is under the reactions tab. If you look at my picture, my video right now, you'll see my hand up. You can also press lower hand if you're done with your question, or you're done with your answer, excuse me. We also want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak. So we ask that when you are speaking, just be intentional with the amount of time that you are taking. We ask that you try to keep answers under 2 minutes. Obviously, you know, we're not going to be sitting here saying, okay, it's been 2 minutes, you know, time's up. But we ask that you just be conscious of that. And we also ask that if you have had an opportunity to speak, that you perhaps allow someone else to speak before you speak again. And we'll monitor that, you know, to ensure everyone has an opportunity. And if you we run into a situation where you've had your hand raised for a while and you haven't had the opportunity to speak, definitely send myself or Genius or John we have in the room helping to moderate. Definitely feel free to send us a private message, and we can ensure that we call on you. So here at Black Owned Maine, we really believe that all areas of giving have the potential to advance racial justice. That there is not a single area of giving that leaves this fact out. And we believe that the systemic nature of racial inequality requires a broadly applied approach. And this approach is designed to counteract a web of stifling actions, often also a web of inactions, right? We hear, I don't like to use the word, but it is what it is. We hear, you know, there's lots of excuses as to why funders sometimes believe that their work doesn't have to do with racial justice. And we want to let you know that there's always an opportunity to advance racial justice, no matter what it is that you're doing. And we're hoping that this conversation today really begins to open up those doors, but ultimately leads to action being taken and for changes and shifts in the tide. So with that being said, in between each of our different topics here, we're gonna just have some transitional music that we play, just to kind of set the tone, help people to relax and again, just to reflect. So that being said, we're going to go into that now, and then we'll go into our first topic for discussion. Genius, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So what I'm doing here is just reading a quick quotation for y'all that reads, race, equity, diversity, and inclusion affect all nonprofits. And thinking your organization is exempt indicates a level of privilege and lack of awareness that may be detrimental to the work. No matter what your organization's mission is, you still need to think about these things. What I'm doing here is going to open up some questions and some answers. We're going to think about interorganizational dynamics. So with that quote in the air, the first question that I would like to pose, and yes, please take time to think and form answers if that's what you need, but I would absolutely love some conversation. At a basic level, my first question is, how does your organization approach racial justice? How does your organization approach racial justice? Okay, I see here. Is it Dania?
Hi, I'm Dania. I use she and they pronouns, and I work for the Maine Women's Lobby. Our work at the lobby is to bring a gender equity lens to the Maine legislature and to connect people to civic engagement. We take the position that Black liberation is at the heart of liberation for all, and the heart of liberation for women from marginalized communities. And so if we are not working towards racial justice for our Indigenous, for our Black, for our immigrant populations, for all of the folks who are people of color in Maine, we are not serving women if we are not also serving them.
Thank you for sharing.
Oops.
Genius, you're on mute again.
Yeah. I was going to say, you can jump in. I see your hand.
This is Yellow Green from the Maine Development Foundation. We are a state chartered public-private partnership that works on long-term economic growth strategies across the state. And I guess I would want to be candid that historically we have not worked on racial justice, and we've only very implicitly and far too little even worked explicitly on equity for underadvantaged groups in general. So I wanted to put that out there, with a degree of candor of where we are on the journey, because I suspect we're not alone, and been doing a lot of work both individually and collectively to advance ourselves on that journey over the last 1 to 2 years.
Thank you. So one thing that I was going to also ask is, we can ask that kind of broad question about racial justice, but also specifically, what areas of giving do you focus on? And is there a lens that has to do with racial equity that you are applying to the areas of giving?
Hi, my name is Hibo Omar. I'm from New Mainers Public Health Initiative. We're located in Lewiston. And mostly, I just want to answer the first question in a sense that as an immigrant, many of my community, normalize the injustice because people don't talk about it. They're fearful. They came from places where they were fearful, and especially in the healthcare, we tend to trust the providers that they're, in our best interest. But according to research, that for pain and, like once people get sick and fall off of being healthy, then they never recover. And if you are, people of color always, are just getting worse. So our agency, for the first time, and since COVID hit, we talk about self-advocacy, because if they think something is wrong, and they have to say something, because you have to also keep in mind that their conversation is through an interpreter. They cannot convey their message on their own. But this concept of inequality and health equity is not there. So we have to awaken them to say, hey, you have to stand up for what you think is wrong. If this medication is not working, please speak up. Don't just pop those pills. Because you see young women who will have normal pregnancy, and all of a sudden high blood pressure and problem would arise. So self-advocacy and equity is really a big thing that we have to awaken the community as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just actually want to take a moment. Thank you, Hibo, for that comment. I want to kind of highlight or echo what I perceive in that, because it's very important. When we talk about marginalized communities or voices that have been overlooked or historically overlooked or undervalued, underutilized, all of those ideas and in all those buckets, one of the ways to defeat and specifically counteract that persistent history is to convince some of those people with those voices that, like, raising it and making sure that it's heard is valuable, powerful, even if it's difficult, right? Like, to really, like you were saying, Hibo, to have people advocate for themselves, just to make sure that their actual state is understood, is a way to counteract the reality, as simple as that may seem. So I just really, really appreciate that highlight. It's not as simple as it sounds, but it's not as easy as it may, as one might think. But the other thing, the reason I pointed out is that on the other side of that is, and this is part of why we're all here in this room, is just helping organizations and individuals learn to reach into those communities and reach out towards those voices more as well, right? Because it works both ways, right? So I'm just, hopefully by the end of all this, there's some other tools you have and some new ways to think about it, some new perspective, right? So I really appreciate that. Is there anyone else who wants to chime in on that? I will say, as you're still stewing on that, this all does kind of beg the question. And again, I'm still open to, if y'all have some stuff to say about those last couple of things, but this is my next layer to think about this as we tease out how your organizations do or don't or should or will approach racial justice is, how can your organization ensure that you stay open to new ideas and open to diverse voices? What can you do? John, as I'm sweeping through, if you can help me see anybody who's raising their hand or who's jumping off mute or anything, definitely feel free, y'all, to raise your hand or to share your thoughts.
I see Jen Shepherd.
Yep. Hi. Thanks for having me. So I'm from Penobscot Theater Company, and in the theater world, there was a document, if anyone's here, the We See You White American Theater. And that is where we've started, but I'm new to this executive director position here. And one thing that I've been doing is questioning how we usually cast, questioning where we usually communicate our needs, and also questioning the playwrights we usually look at, trying to make sure that we're listening when people give us suggestions and not just listening, but then call to action, pursue that course, really looking outside of where we normally look. And I suppose that goes along with what we don't know. So trying to keep our head on a swivel in terms of like looking in new directions. I think that sounds simple, but it's been interesting for us to question the way we usually do things, and not even the way hadn't seen it, and now being able to see like, oh yeah, that's what we've always done. Let's change it. Let's just change it. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing. And one part of what I hear, just a part of, everybody, let's chew on all that, but I'm just trying to highlight something, that head on a swivel piece, like not feeling settled into knowing exactly what's happening, not feeling settled into knowing exactly where everything is, but for the strategy, instead of it being static, quarter after quarter, year after year, for it to be like a parent. You ever seen a mother or a father with 3 or 4 kids around them? Yo, it is not settled into what it's gonna be. You know what I'm saying? If you play sports, I remember playing football, especially on defense, head on a swivel, like always being aware. You might get an interception and get the first touchdown of the game while you're on defense. I don't know if y'all know football, you don't always get a chance to do that on defense. But the approach, head on a swivel, being how you play the game, as opposed to being settled into knowing exactly what's going to happen. That's the part that I wanted to just highlight from what Jen said, as well as continue to chew on everything. Anybody else who wants to layer in?
I'll go. I'm Liz Rogers. I work at Coastal Enterprises, or CEI. We're not a grant maker, but we're a community development financial institution. And I think in the past year have really recognized how we need to deepen our impact. And also that this commitment is a process, as you're saying, and it's a journey. So we want to hold ourselves accountable to goals as we recognize what they should be, but then you're always wanting to put that goalpost further out as you learn and as you recognize, where you're not meeting what the goals or the intention that we're trying to meet. So both trying to hold ourselves accountable in the moment and set those goals and meet those goals, but also see it as a journey and a process and learning together.
Yes, thank you. Who had their hand up next?
I've got Don, Jonah, and then Bruce in that order. Don, you on mute.
First, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the hosts for taking such great care of us in our discomfort, and for putting yourselves out there. So thank you for that. I want to also echo a little bit of what Jen said and what Elizabeth just offered. This has definitely been a journey, both personally and professionally. I run a small theater in Monmouth, Maine, and there's been a lot of aha moments, but the biggest one recently for me was who needs to be at the table. So really wanting to address the WCU white American theater demands, but also not wanting it to be a bunch of white people sitting around saying, this is what we think we should do for the BIPOC and trans and LGBTQ people we want to bring into our environment. So I created an anti-racism working group of people who had worked with us in the past or were going to be working with us this summer, and invited them to help us create what are eventually our addressing of the demands, but also how we wanted to put our predominantly white dead playwrights off to the side a little bit, and really commit to producing plays by people of color, directed by people of color, and also full of stories of people of color, but not in a way that's us being presentational, but in a way that genuinely invites people to the table. And it's been an amazing experience, from having them take a look at our handbooks and our agreements. Where is systemic racism so embedded in our organization's culture, and how do we make sure we root it out in a way that's healing and helpful for everyone? So thank you for your time and for giving us this opportunity to really hear what other people in the state are doing.
Yes, thank you all for this workshop, and thanks for doing it more in a participatory way. It's really nice to be able to have folks sharing and questioning. And maybe just to build off of what was just said, I've thought a lot about that kind of, how do we bring people to or create space at our table? But I think one of the questions I've been wrestling more with is, how do I support other people's tables and support the building of those tables? And then when I'm invited, join them and listen in a way that's maybe sometimes uncomfortable, maybe sometimes really challenges what my own preconceived notions are or my ideas are, or and be willing to let go of those and be like, sit in that uncomfortability. And so just, yeah, like that importance of, I mean, I think now, particularly as I'm in like a foundation role, it can be really easy to say, hey, come to our table and jump through this hoop to get to our table. And it's really like, how do I break down that hoop, you know, and take all the metal that was used that hoop, recycle it, get those resources out to the tables that need to be built for the people that need to be there. And also to say like, hey, if I'm not invited to that table, like, because that's a table for this community, these folks to be sitting here, and like, that's also all right. Like, and I need to respect that and still help build that. And sometime maybe I will get a chair there too, you know. And so I think that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And just one of the pieces, just building relationships, you know, just really, which I take time, take humility, and take listening. So just been trying to, you know, really build those relationships and listen to people, and listen when people are addressing harm or hurt that I might have caused, and be able to really learn from that, grow from that, and you know, and continue to build relationships.
Thank you.
And I'll hop right in. Yeah, I think that, you know, where we are right now is, I want to recognize the moment. And I'm realizing that we're in this huge transition moment right now as we're going back into as we're and I say this cautiously, that we're coming out the other end of of isolation. And there's this incredible opportunity right now to restructure, as there was a year ago. I serve on the permanent commission for the state, and one thing that we were recognizing is that there was a lot of resources that were coming into the state, and we had to get very creative as to how to distribute those. And I've seen a lot of people with this consciousness that really came out of two different major events. One was COVID and the disproportionate impact that it had on marginalized communities, and the second, of course, was the mobilizing that happened with BLM. And with that consciousness in mind, as we started seeing resources coming into the state, you started seeing people aware of the digital divide. This is something we've been talking about now for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden it became front and center. And I think what really happened is that with that consciousness that had come out of those two events, people started directing resources into places that had been crying out, for years. I think the other thing that came out of a lot of this past year is we recognized that there were resources out there, that we had to change the dialogue, that we had to stop taking the answer of, okay, this is a moment of austerity, or we have to live in austerity. It was like, no, we need to spend, we need to restructure, we need to start changing the tide. And so over the past year, I've seen some real movement on that front, but I think we also need to recognize that right now we're at the restructuring moment on the other end of that. And so how do we direct those resources in a way that's meaningful, that creates equity, and fish don't know the water's wet. It's my favorite thing ever to say. So this is our chance to recognize that we're living in water. This is our chance to look at that scaffolding and say, okay, this is here. This is something that we've always taken for granted. So let's notice it, because we have a chance to rebuild it in a very meaningful way, because we're all in flux. So I'm really encouraged and excited by kind of, what the possibilities are right now. But I think it's only going to happen with a lot of intentionality around it. So yeah, I guess that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you for folks that are commenting, and for everyone who just shared, because for us, it was going to be critical today that this be a conversation, because believe me, the answers lie like within all of us, not within like us telling y'all. That ain't going to be it. So thank y'all for real, for sharing and for making this something where we can kind of all learn from each other and teach each other. I will say that unless someone's really dying to say one final short comment, I'm going to move forward to our next section. I'll say that just to wrap up that section, it is important to keep in mind, and I mean, I'll say, take this from me personally, that your organization has done some work about unconscious bias, about, DEI, dug into some of that training, some of that thinking. A lot of what we're talking about is this kind of rethinking and reconditioning of your approaches and your mindset and kind of the comfortability that you just naturally have landed in. But know that sometimes for Black folks, for instance, stepping into, if the need is to step into your world, we can be harmed because of what you don't understand about allowing us into your space, if that makes sense. And I'll just say, I'd like to skip that part. If that's what, like, if that's part of what happens from us all working together, let's make those spaces less harmful. And I mean, that's obvious, that's broader than race and racial equity, right? What I'm talking about there for sure, but I'm just giving that example. going to read a quote from a nonprofit director. We have an unfortunate joke in our sector that the smaller the grant is, the more irritating and more time-consuming the application is. This is hilarious until we realize that many organizations led by marginalized communities can only access these small grants.
So with that quote, we want to discuss a few different things. We want to talk about how that affects relationship cultivation, as well as being a general, barrier to entry. But let's start with relationship cultivation. So in being that, nonprofits, obviously there's a time suck, right? It's organizations only have so much time, so many resources, et cetera, et cetera. So we really want to dive into what that inequity actually looks like, and talking about, the fact that time is not equitably available to all applicants, and how can your organization or organizations that you represent or sit on the board for ensure that opportunities to work with your organization or to receive funding from your organization is able to be presented in a way where folks actually are able to access those resources. So the question I want to ask is, how does your organization cultivate relationships with new grantees? Just generally broad, is it a matter of them finding you or you finding them, or what does that look like?
I'll share. I'm not a grantee or a foundation, but we are a retreat and conference center on the beach in Saco, Maine. And one of the things that we've really worked hard at in the last couple of years is reaching out to BIPOC organizations and asking them if they'd like to do a workshop or a conference here at Ferry Beach, and then we try to find ways to underwrite their stay. So that's brought to us a Black Women Writers Group and a spiritual group called The Well, and some others that we feel are enjoying the being able to be on the beach and have a conference and workshop.
Thank you for sharing. When you say underwrite their stay, can you elaborate on what that means?
So we're a not-for-profit also, and so we get some grants from other small grants. We're also struggling with that as well, but we have a lot of people who love this place and give money each year. So if we can make something a lot cheaper for the organization to come and stay and do stuff, like we're working for, there's a group of Black women quilters that we're hoping to get in 2022 to come. And so we're trying to figure out what can we afford and what can they afford to make it happen. And we're pretty excited about stuff like that.
Thank you for sharing.
Rose, if you want, I'll share. This is Gloria. Nice to see your smile. Well, Rose is a good example. So I found out about Blanco in Maine and the work that they were doing early on and reached out to Rose. So, we're constantly on the lookout for new organizations, especially BIPOC organizations, to build relationship and guide through grant making, and any other sorts of grant programs that we know of, and make connections with other funders around. And so we talked to, I think it was actually Gabriela and I, who were in conversation about Black-owned Maine, and put that on my radar screen.
Thank you, Gloria. That what you said brought up some good points. The sharing of information, sharing of knowledge, being on the lookout for new organizations, as well as that how you build that relationship and how you search for new organizations. And a follow-up question for you or for anyone in the room, really, when searching for new grantees, how do organizations gauge readiness, right? I think there's often the organization is new, they don't have an online presence, they haven't made this crazy impact yet, right? So how do organizations say, okay, that's someone we want to invest in? And anyone really can answer that question from any side of the table, whether they've been on the grant making side or the alternative side where they've received a grant as a new organization that was in development.
I can add something to that. I mean, we're really working hard to make some really important changes. And one thing about that is we used to have people just find us, and now we are also trying to do more outreach. And I think a lot of this is starting to become more relational for us, and being able to have time to really make the time to really talk with potential grantees or organizations just about what they are dreaming of and what their projects might be like, and what they're hoping to be doing in their community. And so I think we're starting to put more weight on that, and trying to think about this as an investment in supporting, an organization that may be younger or just may not be on the books, a safe bet for like a outcome-based grant. And really looking at our bigger goals for what we want to see happening in the communities, or what our partners want to see happening in the communities, and how we can make that happen with them.
That brings up a good point, and I feel like it ultimately, a lot of this comes down to trust, right? And trusting that organizations are going to do the right thing. And if there's a mess up, trusting the process, that it's a learning experience, and they'll come out of it some way or another. Liz, what organization is it that you work with?
I work with the Maine Humanities Council. So we have
a
small grants program, but we're really putting a lot more focus on it right now.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And I saw someone else. Yes,
Rose,
go ahead.
may I jump in? Hi, I'm Joya Perugini. I work with family philanthropy that does giving in Maine. And I guess I just want to add on to some of the conversation and maybe connect some of the prior conversations. To me, it's kind of a dawning realization around limits of your existing networks, right? You show up in community, you talk to people, but I think over the last couple of years, realizing that those networks are just limited by, your existing networks. So, as staff to a family philanthropy, really thinking about being very deliberate about expanding your networks and talking to people in places where you might not have historically done that. And I'll give a for example. So part of this suite of family philanthropy is a family philanthropy Jane's Trust. And last year I was introduced, honestly, by John Shoes, who's in our networks, to the folks at the Abyssinian Meeting House in Portland. And I had sort of this aha moment of, why on earth had we not met those folks before? They were doing community-based education, historic preservation, cultural program, all sort of right in the sweet spot of where this trust was giving, but my networks had limits, right? And so that's on me to kind of show up in different places, to really be very deliberate about not just relying on, the proverbial usual suspects, right? And expanding, my networks. I guess I also just want to name this issue around power, because we know it's implicit. It's so entrenched and implicit in the philanthropic structure. I may be the nicest human on the planet, but there's inherent in this structure a power dynamic created by, money and privilege. I'll just name it. So, part of this, I'll use my I statement, my dawning realization of like, it's inherent in the systems, and it's on me to try to break that down. And so sometimes, the funder showing up and saying, I've discovered you. I'm increasingly not personally comfortable with that. So trying to be very intentional about how that's received, and the power of relationship building and the power of trust building, to me, has to be inherent in this practice if we're going to make progress, and then being prepared to dismantle some of the systems that we have internally that are getting in the way of that. So to me, these two things, the prior conversation and this conversation, connect really specifically about how you show up and how you try to dismantle the power system that exists. So thanks for letting me share.
Absolutely, thank you. I think it's some really good insight when we talk about the power system that does exist. It exists. It's here. It's right in front of us, whether or not we want to admit it or not. And that's what our first section up here, where we said, it's all areas have the potential to advance racial justice. It's just, at this point, it's fact more than persuasion, right? So thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it. So we are going to move on to our next and final topic here. If there's anyone else that wants to share about the previous two topics, feel free now, or feel free to speak about them as we move on. We don't have to be so rigid, but let's leave a moment here if there's anyone else.
Hi, Rose. This is Hibo. I remember we are an ethnic-based organization, so this was back in 2014. That prior to that, we couldn't get any any fund, and many of the time, the irony of it that I used to always wonder is people will say, "Well, sorry, you haven't worked with." You weren't granted anything. If no one will give you a chance, then how would you, but it was, yes, we were new, but we were on the ground prior to that, close to 3 years, but we didn't have a chance to get any grant. And then I remember one grantee that, we will always be in depth to, I guess. The grant was given to us, but then we were told that if you mention our name, then you will get more grant. And heaven behold, that prophecy stood there. And, from then on, it's just history. But, it's mind boggling to that, I hope minds will change, especially for ethnic-based organization, that that chance need to be given before anything can be done. So at least I just wanted to throw that out. But it seems that centuries ago, but it was just 6 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate the different perspectives that are being shared in this conversation. I was going to offer quickly an analogy. You know about how we work out, or we practice instruments, or we study, we write to create new neural pathways in our brain. You know, if you remember back to like the dendrites and all of how the things flow through your brain and how it jumps across this little synapse and all that, right? Remember all that kind of stuff? I mean, that's real. The thing that I'm trying to get y'all to think about is how when you do something that's uncomfortable or different, that's when like literally you're creating new pathways or coming up with new connections that did not exist before. Someone was saying earlier about how intentional they are in a sense, finding themselves in new situations, you know, like that's literally what it takes to begin to alter these networks. So I just want to give y'all that analogy to think through. And then moving forward here for a moment. All right. I want to share that and remind you, keep in mind, know that time as a resource is not equitably available to all applicants. And if that's a foreign theme or idea, go ahead and write that down, and I'll just really invite you to look into the equitable availability of time. Yeah. One thing that we wanted to just throw out, we came across and we thought it was an interesting example. You can save people time and allow them, for instance, to present an application or something they've prepared for another organization in depth to you. That's one way to think about creating equitability in people's time across a lot of these lines that we're considering. And with that idea in the air, I was going to move forward here into our barriers to entry. That's just our next section, as we're calling it. You know, it is something important to think about. Us as a nonprofit, I mean, like Rose said, we're relatively new, but as we've been learning, I mean, I've been part of different grants and different juries to help give out grants and stuff. And so as I'm understanding this world, I understand maybe why there are quote unquote barriers to entry. But one of the things that I want to pose as a question to get us stewing, get us going. What barriers of entry exist when applying for funding through your organization? You know, one example being time inequity. But what barriers of entry exist when applying for funding through your organization?
I want to add to, I've been thinking of this question, perhaps put yourself in the shoes of someone who has a lack of time and already has a lack of resources. What would that then feel like? I know it's a vulnerable question, so take as much time as you need to think.
Yes, but I appreciate that ad, Rose. Use that constraint to help you articulate the reality.
I'm not able to get my hand to go up for some reason, but so Liz Rogers, I work at CEI and we're a financial institution. So we're not a grant maker, but we are moving capital. with a deep mission. And we have to balance risk. And, we have internal conversations all the time between mission and risk and return. And also really, a very dynamic and active conversation around that. And so when we are getting, first of all, there's the loan application itself. Is that a barrier to entry? But also we might have a collateral requirement that is also a barrier. And so do we get rid of the collateral requirement? Do we come up with different products that are more helpful and allow access to capital that entrepreneurs and business owners need at a deeper level. So those are some of the conversations that we're having. It's a little different than funding, but I think collateral and looking at the time needed to apply for a loan, and also the language that maybe we're using that is complex and hard to understand, and then recognizing that we have been somewhat passive in that people come to us for financing, and we need to be out in communities letting people know about what we have to offer in terms of advice and financing.
Thank you for sharing. Those are, I think, impactful ideas. I would imagine that some people are thinking of some of them, but anything new you can pick up or any new approach, it's just interesting. It's like I want to highlight certain things that stood out to me, but I don't want to act like anything is more or less important, But for me, that thinking about the time commitment to complete an application, assuming that a person easily has access to all the paperwork, calculations, summations, per se understands all the jargon kind of in that world. That's, I guess to put it plainly, that's not what equals someone who's gonna really execute well with funding or with a certain situation, a certain partnership. That's, those things aren't, even though, and I really appreciate how you say, and everyone interpret, when I throw this out there and I talk about funding or whatever, I understand there's different types of organizations, so I appreciate how you kind of interpreted that in your sense, right? But it's important to understand that we are coming from these worlds and from these places where there is this jargon, there is this way of thinking, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's like, I don't know, it's like if you go into a situation in the party, everyone's dressed different than you, like it doesn't mean you got to leave, but you got to at least recognize that maybe my approach to this party should feel slightly different than I thought before I stepped in, but I'm still good. You know what I mean? Right? Am I up to the challenge of, right? And again, being outward seeking. I can tell you at Black on Maine, we talk a lot about conversations, whether they went up or down or whatever, about feeling like, man, that person they're really pulling us into their world, to their table. They don't seem to recognize our table. I think maybe we've said those words to each other before, or like literally, pick one word and shift it. So something else I want to float out. Hey, I see your hand. I think the next hand I see here is Jonah.
Yeah. So I've been on the other side of grant seeking, both like for an organization I was a part of, but also then doing a lot of work with different immigrant-led cooperatives. And so one thing I just want to note as the initial barrier is language, and that language can be a huge barrier. And that's not, so working with immigrant-owned cooperatives that don't speak or write English, but even folks, limited English, challenges with English, challenges with writing, those can be huge barriers just for any process. And also worked on federal grants, and having matching requirements and having, I mean, just navigating through these processes can be incredibly huge barriers. So as I've come into philanthropy, like one of the things that, I mean, both of us excited about with Sewell and that we've been working on is really reducing our barriers. But I do want to note that like that there's still various barriers that do exist. So I mean, just knowing that we exist, knowing that there's these opportunities. Sewell's had a closed process for a number of years, and so that's been a barrier for new organizations to come in. When we have like right now we have a grant round that's open, people knowing about it. Really, we have certain focus areas, those fits for people, and and it can be sometimes like, I don't know if that's right, so like there's those types of things that can be real barriers to, again, kind of different hoops that people feel they need to jump through or that we put forward. And then we've reduced what our application is, but still there's an application. Still, it requires writing, it requires English writing, and it takes time, and getting those materials together. So I mean, there's definitely, I think recently we did a grant round for existing grantees where we just had conversations where we talked for half an hour with existing grantees, and that was great. Like, and to be able to, in many ways more generative, I think, than having a written application that gets filed. And so we're definitely excited to explore further kind of how we can use other ways of communication beyond the written word, to have applications, because again, that can be a real barrier for people. But also recognizing sometimes those other processes and other things can be other time sucks and barriers as well. So just really trying to think about accessibility as we move forward.
I really do appreciate that. And ideas like accessibility, I think about it as expanding the modalities of communication that you offer and that you take time to master, and I know, it's like, I don't want to throw out too many examples, but just be like, I'm a tall Black man that's loud, right? Like I remember being in school and like the disconnect would just be like the teacher expected, like, I don't know, business casual attitude. And I had a super dope attitude and I knew all the answers, but I wasn't coming through business casual. And she just couldn't speak that. So I lost. And I also think she lost. And I think the class lost. So I really appreciate how Jonah was talking about, like, man, we did like some conversations. You know how many people know how to flow at you through like body language and words, but putting it all on paper in little squares and boxes sucks? Right? Or can you see that? Can you roll with that language too? And understand that is as valid as any? Right? I really, for real, I like that. That's broadening, right? Increasing. I don't know. We're in the military. Something's going crazy. We don't know. It's aliens. Well, let's add a couple sensors and antennas to our array. We already have an array. Let's pick up more languages. Let's add infrared, right? That's what we're talking about. So those things being said, and to move forward, we only have so much more time. I did want to say another critical thing to ask, and I'm not going to say you have to say this here, but a question is, how does your organization perpetuate injustice? I'm not saying that you got to pour it out right here. And this isn't about demonization, but when you think through the lines of things that we've laid out in the conversation we've had, we can understand that there are some folds and some corners and some areas, and this is just life, where, dang, over time, decisions that were made in certain ways did, in fact, perpetuate injustice. I think being able to admit that even to yourself is critical, right? Because that's part of like understanding and being able to move forward. So I'll leave that at that, because I think everyone here has been intentional. I can see us starting to make those connections. That being said, one question, another thing to consider: do you have criteria and policies in place that seem race neutral, but may be barriers to potential grantees of color? a quick example, something that has popped up, we'll just say in my universe multiple times recently. Do you say, hey, I can offer you $5,000 to do this amazing thing that you have to do. But as soon as you win it, keep in mind that you'll get $2,500 up front and you'll get the rest at completion. Oops. Might as well just pull back my application. Not sure why I didn't read enough details to recognize that someone expected that I would have half the money. Oh, I thought I was applying for $5,000 to do this amazing thing. I know that might be the norm in the world in some instances, but what does that do? Those things being said, I've already kind of jumped Rose into the recap and connecting the dots. That was what we had as our next section. We don't want to take up too much more time. But again, anyone who took notes, for real, thank y'all for being here, just being intentional, being in this space that we created to be together, being open, being honest, even in uncomfortable moments, and also giving that time for things to breathe. These are the types of conversations that we believe are required. But follow that through line. Think about barriers to entry. Think about how you are creating and maintaining relationships, how you're creating those new neural pathways as I was talking about. Right? And then I'll hand it over to, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I do have to do this. I'm going to go ahead and say, this is, I think, one of the most important things to take away. If you want to write it down, that's fine, but I think it's most important to even listen. What we want you to take away most is a call to action. The action is donate to a Black organization as immediately as you can. As immediately as you can. I'll say this, you can check out our directory. There's a lot of Black-led organizations there. Also, our company, Black Owned Maine, is a Black-led nonprofit. We talk about these things. We highly suspect everyone here will continue to think about these things, but we are calling you to take action. And I'll let Rose wrap us up.
Thank you, everybody. This conversation was really impactful, and it actually gave, I've been taking notes. I don't know if anyone's realized this whole time, but it's really helpful just to see where the community is at and how we can ensure we continue to make an impact together, right, opposed to separation. So if anyone's interested in following up with us and checking out our work, you can go to our website. It's blackownedmaine.com. blackownedmaine.com. We are currently fundraising to redesign that website. So bear with us as we go through that process of myself, who is not a developer, attempting to make changes. It doesn't really work. So we're trying to hire a professional to do that. So bear with us. You can also email us, blackownedmaine@gmail.com. And we are on all social media, with Instagram being our largest presence, but Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all at Black Owned Maine. So relatively easy to find us. If you search Black Owned Maine on Google, you'll see us on a lot of pages. So thank you guys so much. And if, I think we will end it with that. If there's anyone else that has anything to say, feel free to step on. Otherwise, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
And thank you, John, for helping us to manage. But yeah, if anyone has a final thought, we're open for that.
You all have the comments in the chat box, so I just want to recognize those and thank you guys back as well.
Welcome. Really appreciate y'all. All right, I feel good. We're gonna close down the space. Y'all have an amazing day and get active.